Hello and welcome to Partially Redacted, a podcast where we discuss privacy and security engineering and related topics. I'm your host, Sean Faulkner, and today I'm joined by CEO and founder of Trickest, Nenan Zaric. And we'll be just talking about pen testing, bug bounty hacking, and automating your security workflows. Nenan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here.
Awesome. Yeah, so I first came across Trickest when I was at InfoBip's Shift conference last September. I was there speaking and you guys had a booth there. And I had a very nice conversation with your head of operations, Nemanja. And I really liked the backstory of the company and what you were trying to do. So it's great to have you on the show. But let's start with some basics. Who are you? What's your sort of educational background, work history, and how did you end up where you are today?
Mm-hmm. So my educational background is basically that I'm a drop-off from faculty, so I don't have that kind of official education. But that was because I got pulled in my faculty in my college to work in terms of that was more interesting than organizational sciences I studied. So I initially started working in various outsourced cybersecurity companies as a security engineer, where we had a lot of cybersecurity projects where we did pen testing for the clients. And prior to Trickest, I worked in a biotech company, which is creating a platform with a workflow-like approach, where you create the workflows to analyze biomedical data. That data is usually DNA, and users on the platform created those workflows to derive new medicine from it. So that was the first connection and the first spark in thinking about the Trickest and how that workflow approach could be used in offensive cybersecurity.
Yeah. So before you started at Trickest, you were, you worked as a penetration tester and bug bounty hacker. So which I think sounds, pretty cool. It's a pretty cool. Good job. But, for those that are listening that are perhaps unfamiliar with those concepts, what is pen testing and bug bounty hacking?
Basically, those have the same goal, which is finding a weakness inside of the company's infrastructure, in short. By infrastructure, I mean everything that is helping that organization operate, like from people, equipment, buildings, servers, network, routers, like everything. And the difference is that the difference between bug bounty hunting and pen testing is in approach. So bug bounty hunter's approach is more creative, but also more frustrating than pen testing. So I will dive deeper into those two. So bug bounty hunters are using their creativity in the process of finding weaknesses. And those companies that are targeting are usually Fortune 500 companies, where they firstly need to learn about the company, check what products and features they have, dive into their processes, and follow their infrastructure as it evolves. And that frustration comes from the knowing that you might be not the first one that's got the vulnerability. And also there is a probability that you will not find any bugs, hence don't get any reward, like in terms of money or swag. So it's kind of pretty difficult psychologically to do that job. And the pen testing is like pen testing project or pen testing service is more strict and organized. Initially, you usually know what systems are you targeting, what your targets are, what is the goal of the test, how much you will earn from the test, and sometimes even companies give you the source codes, so you analyze it and find vulnerabilities. So when you're doing the pen testing, there is not many undefined variables like you do in bug bounty. In general, like when you're a cybersecurity engineer, you can do three types of work. You can work in a cybersecurity company, which is doing the pen test. You can do the bug bounty hunting, even full time. So sometimes people get more money and more bigger salary than working in some regular corporations or companies in general. And you can work in a red team or threat intelligence team or any kind of similar security team inside of the organization you're working for.
So with the bug bounty hunting is if you, as an independent, target some sort of, Fortune 500 company, is the Fortune 500 company knowledgeable that you're targeting them, or are you doing that essentially on your own with the idea that if you discover a vulnerability, you're going to inform them and essentially expect that they'll be happy that you inform them, so they'll give you some sort of compensation in exchange?
Mm-hmm. So firstly, you should not target the companies which don't have bug bounty programs. That's kind of illegal, even though like in the last couple of years, companies got more open to the bug bounty platforms and the cyber security researchers submitting the issues. So usually when you want to start, you go to the platforms which provide that kind of services, and that service is basically connection between the company and the individual researcher. There is a couple of them, and some of them are HackerOne, Bugcrowd, Integrity, etc. And basically, when you jump on their platform, you can see the profile or program or bug bounty program for a specific company, and then you can see what you can do or what the rules are basically, and that's called responsible disclosure. So for example, some company says we have these products, these domains, these IP addresses, these are the vulnerabilities we want to be found, and the other ones are not in the scope basically. So you have the scope of the company you're targeting, and you have also some kind of the tables based on the severity of vulnerability. You will find how much money you will get.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And obviously, you don't want to be just randomly targeting companies and trying to find their vulnerabilities without them knowing that you're doing those things. So, from your experience as, pen tester, bounty hunter, and maybe even your experience at Trickest, what are some of the common mistakes that companies make that allow essentially a hacker to penetrate their security?
Basically, the companies are doing the most natural thing they can do is to ship features fast. So that kind of shipping features fast opens the doors to the vulnerabilities that haven't been checked. And I think that the continuous and automated security plays a really big role, which is helping companies ship like they already do, but more secured infrastructure and environment. So I think that the main point is like they are not doing like a lot of stuff wrong, just that they don't have integrated automatic offensive cybersecurity into their processes, which we could see especially with the bug bounty platforms, because like each time a company delivers some new feature, they're sending us like a private emails to say there is a big scope, this feature has been released, can you check it out, and so forth. So there are some kind of advancements there, but I think automation is something that is lacking the most.
And I guess, like, how should companies be thinking about protecting themselves and their customer data to prevent, attacks? Is it really a matter of putting in these sort of automations that you're talking about, or in what sort of specific automations should they be leveraging to hopefully protect themselves from a potential attack?
Yes, as I mentioned, the focus should be on constantly attacking yourself, assessing what's wrong, what could be better, what not, and then you can drive better the decisions in your development cycle as a company. Of course, education also plays an important role in these environments, where every employee should, from every level, of course, should need to have some level of security knowledge. From the developer's perspective, they could easily forget to add a particular validation inside of the code, which can lead to serious vulnerabilities. That is the reason why you should always test and check if something is vulnerable. Additionally, like developers would never know to write a perfect code and make code without the vulnerabilities, because it's just not possible. And if they did, then we would not have this podcast, and Trickest would not exist, and basically the hackers and bug bounty hunters would be not needed. So that's some kind of a connection between the love and hate relationship between the developers and the bug bounty hunters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, in the case, people they're not going to write perfect code. Mistakes happen. It's really, not necessarily an intentional thing. Just oversights happen. It's a lot to try to understand and digest while you're also trying to ship code for features that are going to, essentially deliver higher, more ROI or, better customer experience. So from, your experience either as a pen tester or bug bounty hunter, when you're trying to test the vulnerabilities of a system and try to find where these types of mistakes have been made. What are you like? Where do you start with that process? Like, what are the types of things that you're kind of checking to see? Like, oh, did maybe it's set up this way, and that will allow me to that'll be a sort of weakness in the system.
Mm-hmm. So that comes from the experience. Basically, like hackers are like jack of all trades, master of none. So they know each technology in particular, they know each vulnerability in particular, some better, some not. So basically, when you like initially start, you need to find about what is the infrastructure for a specific company. That means like all of their web servers, like IP addresses, host names, all of that technical stuff. And then when you find those, you dive deeper into their products, their processes, how they're working, what are the employees. Like you are looking at the company like you're the most notorious hacker there is. You're trying to think like the most notorious hacker. So basically, when you dive deeper, you find about some sort of mechanisms there, and then you try everything to make them not working properly. So basically, it could be even that you just stop it, or you find some particular vulnerability. And apart from that, you're going like deeper into their cycle, and then like every day, every month, or whenever you have time, check if the new stuff is out, because like whenever like the new feature is being pushed to the production for any kind of product, there is a big chance there is a vulnerability there. So that is the targets that you wanna see when you're working in a bug bounty, like companies which have a big infrastructure but also have a fast development cycle where you can find more vulnerabilities and get more cash as a bug bounty hunter.
Yeah, so it seems like you need a pretty, like you mentioned, be a million miles wide, inch deep on a lot of things. So big breadth of understanding of different technologies, different sort of architectural approaches, software development life cycle, plus being able to deep dive and sort of do the background research to really understand like how a company is operating before you can even begin to think about, what are the potential exploits for that business.
Yeah.
So you are, as we mentioned, the CEO and founder of Trickest. What exactly is Trickest?
Trickest is a platform for automated offensive cybersecurity. The core of the platform is the editor, where we integrated the cybersecurity community knowledge, which you have it on hand. Those are the tools that are being used by the offensive cybersecurity, and you can use them as a building blocks to create custom workflow automations.
So this idea of, essentially automating security workflows and this sort of offensive approach to cybersecurity, is this something new? And, if so, like how is it traditionally done? And I guess like how does Trickest improve on that traditional model?
Basically, like traditionally engineers, like currently, not like really traditionally, currently engineers are executing those tools in terminal. So basically they install all of them to their own like infrastructure, and they are in variety of programming languages. So it's getting hard for the newcomers to even know how to install those tools, because some of them are in Python, Go, C, or whichever language you can imagine. I mean, that's an open source community, so you can imagine how much of different language there is. And when you actually install those tools, they have the input parameters, like those are command line tools with the input parameters. So each tool is different. So those parameters could range from 1 to 100. And it makes even more complicated to create the flow where the output of one tool is an input to another, especially as you're executing them in terminal. So it's kind of like a messy Chrome browser with a bunch of tabs. So you execute one tool in one tab, wait for it, then the execute second with the input from the first, and so forth. So that's a pretty tricky. And also the infrastructure where you're executing. So if you're in some whatever restaurant or a cafe with a slow Wi-Fi, those tools will be so slow. So you need a big bandwidth to cover all of those kind of network requirements those tools have. So the idea for Trickest is that we solve all of these issues, and you focus on the creativity And basically just drag and drop the tools. Don't worry about the installation of the tools. Don't worry about the parameters. Don't worry about the external infrastructure. Just think about the things you want to build and build it like almost immediately, if you of course know how to use the platform. Everything is managed by us, and we're solving all of the issues.
So are these different tools essentially running within the cloud infrastructure of Trickest? So that way the person has to avoid, downloading, installing, and then kind of running it from their local machine?
Yes, yes. And also when you're executing those tools, you need to define the output. Like usually that's a file. So you say output tool1.txt or whatever when you're executing it. So it is also could become a really messy based from my experience. So for those, we connected basically those tools, those building blocks where you build the workflow with the output. So you don't need to worry about the structuring of the data, because that data is inside of the workflow.
Right. And then I guess what kind of efficiency gain is someone getting with this approach versus, doing this stuff sort of manually and running it on their local machine?
It's not like we don't have like official efficiency, but basically if I speak to some guy which is kind of knowledgeable in bug bounty hunting and knows some scripting languages, and we have some projects where we should create the same automation, him with the scripting, me with the workflow, I think I could make it like users which know how to use the platform could like make it in like 3 minutes, wherever that particular person with the scripting language could make it in like a day, 2, 3, even 3, I guess. So it's kind of like based on how complex that workflow is. But you can see from our social media, like we publish some of the videos how the workflows are built, so we can create a pretty like workflow with like 10 tools in like 2 minutes. So it's kind of like pretty easy when you know how to build a workflow, of course.
Yeah, and I guess like once you have the workflow there too, it's probably easy to modify, update, and also to rerun in a consistent way versus trying to do this stuff where maybe you're trying to get 5 different tools locally to talk to each other. Human error can happen, and you might forget how you set something up because it's been a month or something like that.
Yes.
So what are some of the common use cases that people are using the Trickest platform for?
So common use cases are like from a bug bounty perspective, that's called recon, which is a finding about the infrastructure. And the other ones are for the vulnerability scanning. So basically, when you have the initial data, you do the vulnerability scanning, meaning that you fuzz the application, you screenshot it, you execute the tools which are finding all of the common vulnerabilities you can imagine, like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, local file exclusion, etc. And you can also create network scanners and exploit the network interfaces. Additionally, we have also the container scanning, so you can also do that. So it basically those categories we have, which are solving those kind of use cases, are based on the tools we integrate. So if a tool is covering a specific process and you have a bunch of tools for a bunch of specific processes, you can interconnect them even through the different categories of the tools and create a workflow which is solving your particular use case.
And who's the typical user for this? Is this generally someone who's already been working as a pentester, bug bounty hunter, or maybe a security professional in an organization wanting to essentially automate the testing for their security?
Mm-hmm. So basically, the short answer is both, because we are in the offensive cybersecurity. We mentioned bug bounty hunters as they're using the platform for their own bug bounty purposes. So basically, we have like a two-sided market. One is the individuals, like cybersecurity researchers, bug bounty hunters, or engineers, which are doing that for fun, for bug bounty hunting, or just for research about some particular use case. But also we have the enterprise side of the things, where employees inside of a red team or threat intelligence team are using the workflows to create a solution for a specific use case they have.
And then do you think that a tool like this essentially helps lower the barrier to entry for people that want to go into this field? It's an abstraction layer from having to necessarily know all the ins and outs of all these different sort of underlying tools that you're putting into a workflow.
Yes, and we think that's like one of the main points about the platform is that basically everything is visualized. So like traditional scanners, traditional products are black boxed, meaning that everything is happening in the inside. You just change the inputs and see the dashboards. But basically, with the workflow, you can actually see the methodology of a particular user, which could open more doors for your creativity. You can look at it as a Photoshop for hackers. Like you can see some sort of picture for the inspiration, and then build upon of that inspiration or that picture. Like you have some new idea. So that's exactly what we are trying to do in terms of the education and lowering that entry barrier for the newcomers, because still there is a big shortage gap in cybersecurity community. So we hope that the platform could solve at least some of those newcomers to be like to easily jump into the industry and see how it looks like and what could be done.
And then, for people who are building these custom workflows, is there like a repository of the workflows? Like, is there a way to share those, or get access to essentially workflows that other people have made that might be useful for my own business?
So, like inside of the platform, we have the library with all of the tools we integrated, sorted by category, but also the predefined workflows. Those workflows are initially made by us, but as we are getting more and more users are publishing those workflows. So basically, when you jump into the library, you open the workflow, you see what with the description what this workflow does, and usually that's just one or two or like maximum three inputs which you need to change in order to alter the whole workflow. So you just change it, execute it, and you will have your own results based on your own inputs.
Hey there, it's Sean, host of Partially Redacted. You probably guessed that, since at this point in the interview, you probably recognize my voice. I've been told for years that I have a face for podcasting, but no one has mentioned whether I have a voice for podcasting, so sorry about that. Hopefully, the awesome guest makes up for it. Anyway, if you're enjoying this episode, please support the show by subscribing and telling your friends. You can also join the Partially Redacted community at skyflow.com/community. Okay, that's enough for me. Back to the show. So, what are some examples of either the ready-made workflows or ones that are made by other third parties?
So how we like to build the workflows is to imagine the end result. So what kind of data we want to have at the end, and of course, like what ask ourselves like why we want that data and what does that data means. So after that, when you realize that, you have a better understanding on which problem you're trying to solve, and in which category that workflow is, which means what tools could do the job. So after you have done the initial research, you can drag and drop the tools which are like a small processes. And basically one of the examples we have, and it's pretty like familiar to like non-cybersecurity guys, is the insiders workflow, where initially you input just the company name, and it goes to LinkedIn, finds all of the LinkedIn employees for a specific company, finds their usernames, then permutates those usernames, goes to the code repository like a platform like GitHub, then finds all of their code repositories, their files, because usually specific GitHub account is also connected to the company's account, so they could accidentally push the data, push the credentials to those repositories. So basically, this insiders workflow is finding all of the employees, finding all of their code, and scanning it for the secret leakage. And at the end, the output of the workflow are the secrets which are accidentally pushed to the repository along with the repositories where they are found in. So that is the point where like that could be pretty bad for a company to have like a production access key or secret key or anything that could like be bad or make a breach basically for a company where a malicious attacker could download the data of the users or the data for whatever data organization has.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I mean, I think as someone who works in the security and privacy space, I feel like there's probably on a pretty regular basis, one of the latest data breaches of the company is because essentially someone got a hold of a key that happened to get committed somewhere to some sort of repository, and someone just did it accidentally, didn't know it was there, and then suddenly someone has essentially developer level access to the source code and beyond.
Yeah, that happened to Uber basically like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah. So what's the output of a workflow that when you run one of these automated workflows?
So each tool have their own outputs, and additionally, like apart from the tools, we have also different type of the nodes, which are script nodes, and they're used to manipulate the data. So not all of the tools have that direct input-output connection. Some of the tools you need to parse the output to be able to input to the second tool. So with the script nodes, you have the whole freedom to create whatever you want. Currently, we are supporting only Bash in terms of like programming language, but we're planning on adding like different scripting programming languages like Python. So basically, you can say, I want that report to be in whatever format, like PDF, and then you can just input the outputs from different tools and create a script node which will create those PDFs, YAMLs, JSONs, or whatever it is that you want to achieve. And also, for example, the output could be also the notification, for example, to your Telegram, Slack, or whatever. So you can also schedule the workflow. As I mentioned, like you need to follow the evolution of a specific infrastructure of a company. So you can create a workflow which will trigger whenever something is new, and send the data to your Telegram or Slack channel.
I see. So it's not just a matter in Trickest of taking these existing components that map to a tool and sort of combining them in some new flavor, but you can actually create essentially a custom code that's running on sort of the inputs to generate new types of outputs, and maybe even connect to like a third-party system like Slack to send those results. Okay, yes. So it's a lot of potential customization for creating like really unique workflows. So where do these sort of security workflows fit within the overall development process for a company? Is this an ongoing thing that should be, continually run and tested for weaknesses? And sort of where does that fit, like relative to something like a, CI/CD pipeline, or is this completely outside of essentially the deployment process for source code?
Like all of those development processes are really complex when you input the security perspective in it. So companies should see and notice which kind of checks they need for a specific development cycle. So basically, as our initial idea was to be fully flexible, that the platform is fully flexible when creating the workflows, like cybersecurity engineers and the guys that are working on the automation, the cybersecurity processes should see and notice which kind of development processes need additional checks. So that's the one of the ways to stay ahead of the hackers. And also the big point is that even though you implemented some kind of automated security checks, and it was fine, like it didn't found any kind of issues or vulnerabilities. After some time, the same product with the same version could have the vulnerability because somebody from the community found a specific vulnerability to it. So you must do the like automated scans of your development cycle, but also the production environments in particular. So it should be like a real-time checks, like always attacking yourself in search of like issues, because like the main thing and what you should do is that to find vulnerabilities before the bad guys.
Right. Yeah. Be proactive, essentially. So a large amount of attacks have like a human element to them, social engineering and such. You hear about this all the time. So how does automated workflow help prevent such attacks? Is it possible to actually use Trickest to also essentially be proactive about preventing such attacks?
Yeah, we have like a collection of social engineering tools used by community, where you can create automations which are either connected directly to social engineering, such as finding of the employees and sending them like phishing emails, or indirectly, such as threat intelligence, where you can see, for example, which kind of targets, which kind of phishing targets could be used in those social engineering attacks. So that way you can, for example, be proactive and claim those domains, or test your employees if they are going to click on a unknown links or pictures of cats or whatever.
Yeah. So again, it kind of goes back to like always be attacking yourself so that you're sort of staying ahead of the hackers and potential exploits.
Yeah.
So should a company still be utilizing approaches like, pen testing and bug bounties in combination with Trickest, or do you see this as a service that essentially replaces those approaches to security?
Mm-hmm. Basically, we are an automation company, so we look at ourselves as automating offensive cybersecurity processes, and usually, like bug bounty and pen testing work has a lot of manual things to do. Like you cannot automate clicking on a specific complex product, like in terms of features, buttons, forms, and all of that stuff. But you can do that, find the vulnerabilities, and then automate your approach and find more vulnerabilities. So we are looking at ourselves as a productivity tool for hackers, where they could, like, of course, do their manual work, but they could automate it and reproduce it for a different types of the targets, so they could find even more vulnerabilities.
And how do you prevent the potential someone who's actually like using your tool for malicious purposes versus doing it under essentially like under agreement with a company? I imagine this helps sort of the white collar person, but it could also help somebody who's actually doing this with sort of malintent.
Mm-hmm. So that's one of the reasons why the platform is currently invite only, because we are working on those processes, especially legal processes, to follow all of the procedures on what is happening if somebody misbehaves on the platform and do the malicious work. But from the current experience, based on the current users, they are pretty ethical in terms of those responsible disclosure, that they're not attacking like the infrastructures too much, and that they are not targeting somebody they shouldn't do. In later stages, like when we will have like the public release and everybody could sign up, we will have that know your customer. So this will have additional kind of mechanisms for the validation. And of course, like as they are hackers, like we could not prevent everything, but it's our responsibility to have all of the data in the case something bad happens inside of the platform and inside of the execution. And additionally, even later, we will probably have some kind of that you can execute the workflows on your own infrastructure as a bug bounty hunter. So basically, that will derive our responsibility to the user who is executing the workflow, because that will be his own infrastructure.
I see. Yeah. And then I guess, like, what are your thoughts on the future security in the space? Do you think we're getting better at protecting and locking down systems, or is this something that we're always trying to sort of play catch up to, and we're actually maybe in a worse position today than we were 5 years ago?
That's a good question. So I think the future of security lies in people, and my hope is that by encouraging people to learn and dive deeper into security, and by abstracting the current approach and the current methodology, that learning curve inside of the industry will be much lower for newcomers, which will mean more people will come to engage in cybersecurity and learn, which will ultimately make companies more secure. As I mentioned previously, there is a big shortage of cybersecurity professionals. So I think that we should not focus on protecting and locking the system, but more on the education and like that kind of offensive cybersecurity approach, and making like everyone knows what it is about. And one of the things we are always we always love to say inside our companies, who will guard the guards. So you have a company, and you add a product that is locking down your system or protecting your system, and that product could also have the vulnerability. So that is why our main point is that attacking perspective of offensive cybersecurity.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point about the education component. This is something that we spoke about on the podcast in the past. Like, I think that there has been, there's a lack of essentially education about security, about privacy for people sort of entering the tech industry, whether that's from formal education like I had, or even just industry-based education. It's something that's kind of just taken for granted, and not enough people have the base level knowledge of what are the things I should be at least kind of like conscious of when I'm designing and building systems, so that I'm not just leaving the door like wide open to a potential attack.
Yeah, exactly.
So what's next for Trickest? Like, what is there anything sort of on the future roadmap that you can share? You mentioned eventually sort of opening this up to the public and not necessarily being invite in only, but are there other sort of technologies and things that you're investing in?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we are inviting more and more people, and we have that plan for the public release, where everybody could use the platform and unleash their creativity. And what we're developing for quite a while is the new execution engine, which has the goal to make the execution of those tools seamless and a lot faster. So we think it will be really great and shorten that time to value for our users, where they could just execute, and immediately the tools will be running, and you will get the outputs pretty fast. So that are the big things we are working on. And also we are trying to every day basically to abstract more the editor, to make it more easy to use, and we are working a lot on that UX of the platform to make it like as much user friendly for a very complex kind of industry and problems we are trying to solve.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like a really sound sort of product and business strategy, is abstraction of friction and complexity, and really sort of lowering the barrier to entry and like democratizing different systems. And there's plenty of examples of people who've been wildly successful with that kind of approach. Like even looking at like the payment system and like what Stripe's done to make something like accepting online payments, just like now every engineer just kind of takes that for granted. It's like, oh yeah, I hit a REST API through an SDK, and it's like really easy. But go back 20 years and it was a lot more complicated to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Like today, you could integrate like that kind of products in like matter of week, and like a couple of years ago, it will take like months, maybe even years, if you're speaking about like 10 years ago or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to share?
Nothing else. Like you covered like a lot of like, and you had a lot of good questions. So I think we covered everything here. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, Nenan, thanks so much for coming on the show. I think my hacking days really began and ended in high school, but it's always been a fascinating topic to me, and something I think a lot of people will enjoy learning about. Thanks again, and cheers. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.